This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We are internet friends turned real-life friends who both experienced the tragic loss of our sons to sudden infant death syndrome in winter of 2021.
In the year after Aiden died, my husband and I both became unemployed. My parents divorced, and we had to move 5 times for various reasons.
And as for me, just a few weeks before my son Quinn died, my then husband had come out to me as a transgender woman, and we're subsequently divorcing.
It's been a lot.
It's been a lot.
But as long as we're living, we will love our sons deeply and work to make sure that we live a life that makes them proud.
Welcome to As Long As I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here.
Okay, so should we talk about ads?
Let's talk about advertising. Hi, everybody. Welcome to As Long As I'm Living. We have a guest episode for you today with someone. Her name is Elizabeth Minton. And Judith and I met her.
Technically, it's like Dr. or Professor Elizabeth Minton.
She is a PhD, a doctor. Yeah, a researcher.
Okay.
She's a researcher. And Judith and I met her last summer. She was looking for research study participants. She does work in marketing, and she lost her son Solomon in January of last year, around the same time that Quinn died. And Judith and I both individually reached out to her to participate in the study about how marketing is affected by loss, or how our attitudes toward marketing are affected by loss.
I think this is a hot topic.
Yeah.
Because I think ads are so triggering.
Yes.
And I think ads are everywhere. That's another thing.
Everywhere.
You can't escape them. And the things that you would use to escape, like TV or TikTok or Facebook or literally anything, driving, the billboards, are flooded with ads and messages. And it feels like it's so out of your control. It feels like it's personal. To me, it felt personal.
Yeah.
Like they were personally attacking me.
Well, I mean, in a way it is personal. Like I remember being, like 23, 24, I'd get ads for like Forever 21 and like clothing. And then when I turned 25, it was like all of a sudden it was engagement rings, and then I think the internet knew I got married. So they stopped showing the engagement rings. And then it was all baby stuff all the time before I even had a baby or before I was even trying to get pregnant. And so then I had a baby and then I was searching for baby stuff. So it was all baby stuff everywhere. And then that baby died. And it's like, they don't have like an algorithm to be like, oh, the baby died. Like, let's stop sending her diaper ads. So I still got them. Of course, now at this point, I've not clicked on enough of them that I think they've realized for the most part that I don't have a baby. And now they're like, oh, I think she might be getting divorced. I'm getting like engagement ring ads again. It's bizarre.
But let me ask you a question. I let them know that that this is sensitive content.
Yeah, I always do that too.
So then why am I still being shown this stuff?
I think the drive to send baby shit to us is so strong. Like, I think, we market as sensitive content, but I think they just really want to advertise. Like one thing I still get advertised all the time is nursing bras, and it just sucks. I think I talk about that in the episode. Ugh, sucks.
Yeah. There are definitely some brands. Did we talk about this? Like the brand Love Every. It's like the developmental.
Yeah.
I got ads for them constantly. And I said this was sensitive content, and maybe I wouldn't get it on Facebook, but then I would get it on Instagram, and then I would get it on TikTok. And what I ended up doing is I ended up creating new accounts for everything and just like making like a new persona, basically, because I couldn't escape it. And it was so painful and it was so hard. And it felt like a stab in the heart every time I saw one of those ads.
Yeah, it really does feel like a stab in the heart.
Well, I actually have a question. We talked about this with Elizabeth, but what is an ad that felt good to see? I can't think of one.
I can't think of one either.
It was almost like a relief when I was seeing like ones for like erectile dysfunction, It was like, oh, I've made it.
I completely agree.
I've made it.
I made it through. my original interview for her research study, and I don't remember if I say this in the episode, but there was a TV ad that I really liked on Hulu. Hulu lets you choose which ad you want to see typically. And there was one that had like a father and a daughter, and then there was one that had like a sunset, like as the like thumbnail image. And so I was like, oh, sunset, perfect. Like I don't have to be triggered by this like father and daughter. And I think like that, like I don't remember what company it was for, I have no idea, but like that, I was like I responded very positively to that, like just being given the option to like not trigger myself. And they weren't doing it for that reason. They were doing that because they wanted to have the one that you liked the most. But for me, it was like, which one do I dislike the most?
But I think that that's good.
Yeah.
I think that that's good. And I think that there's a responsibility from people who are dealing specifically with the like baby community, especially because there's so much awareness with like infertility now. There's like a responsibility to, I feel like, to be sensitive to those who are suffering. You know,
I think it's in their best interest too, like because you know, I think we talk about it in the episode. So why don't we send us into our interview with Elizabeth, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. Enjoy, guys.
I think the work you do is just really interesting, and we were participants in the study, but we don't know what the result was. So I feel like it was we were missing the climax. So I'm eager to have you on here so I can find out like what did you discover from all of your interviews?
Yeah.
Wait, let's not dive in there first. Let me introduce you first. Hold on.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so this is Judith, and I am.
And this is Alina. Hi.
And Elizabeth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth.
And you're Solomon's mom.
Yes.
And Elizabeth is a researcher at University of Wyoming, right?
Yes.
Okay. Elizabeth was doing research after the death of her son. She did research on marketing and loss, and how lost parents respond to the marketplace, I guess, and how different companies interact with parents, and then how there's an absence of conversation surrounding loss within that space.
Yeah, and I should say that it all stems from losing my son, and then that transition time of feeling like I had to go back to work and tell people how to sell stuff. And at that point, it's like it doesn't carry the meaning that it used to carry.
After baby Solomon died.
Yeah, after my son died, it was just like, why do I care about this anymore? And so I went through counseling for a while. I'm like, how do I return back to work? And the conversation kept coming up, like, is there any way to find meaning in your work? And I said, well, 50% of my job's teaching, 50% is research. And what if I could look at some of these things that have really bothered me, like the Similac coupons that kept coming in the mail.
My God.
Or like, yeah, or the Facebook ads that kept being like, oh, how many kids do you have? And it's like, do you realize I just lost my child and I can't answer this question?
Horrific. Those ads are horrific. And those Similac coupons, I just want you to know, I called them so many times. And every time I called them, the woman on the other was like, I'm so sorry for your loss. I was like, well, could you stop sending them? She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. The database is 12 weeks behind or some ridiculous thing like that. I called like 4 times. So what were the main questions that you were trying to solve with your research? And what were the results, and how did you go about getting them? Kind of walk us through the process.
Yeah, so I would say I went into the research just wondering what the consumer journey is like after they lose a child. Specifically looking at people that have lost a child from 1 year old to going backwards to the point of having a miscarriage at just a few weeks in gestation. And so I was really open to what I was going to find in that regard. And then I asked a lot of questions about what marketing was like right afterwards, and some of the triggers that hurt them, and some of the things that helped them. And we're, as you may quickly learn in the field of academia, nothing goes quickly. So we're still working on the paper, and hopefully this thing will be published in a couple of years from now. We'll see. But one of the things that I guess really stood out to me that I wasn't expecting to find is the influence that marketing and comments people make are not just in a negative regard. Because a lot of times we think about how the things people say, oh, that hurt me, or the Similac things, or the how many kids, like it's all negative, like all these things that we're talking about. But what a lot of moms brought up is that there are positive triggers as well. And what is most important, if we think about all of this in the role of identity and the baby's identity and the mother's identity, is that they want to keep those identities. And in order to keep those, people have to acknowledge the fact that those things are true. And so a positive trigger is saying the name of the child or including that person in a Mother's Day card or anything that keeps those two elements alive. And so that just tells us that it's not just stop doing everything, marketers. It's there are ways for you to acknowledge the fact that mothers are still mothers, even if they don't have their children right here in their arms. And that acknowledgement is a positive trigger that helps to maintain that identity and gives them positive emotions and positive outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like I can imagine I think we even may have talked about this when you were interviewing me. Honestly, it's hard to remember because this year is a blur, as I'm sure it is for you as well.
Yeah.
But I just remember thinking like if a company in a Mother's Day ad, for example, had, mothers of all types. So, a mom of a newborn with a living newborn, a mom at a graveyard with her, child's grave. There are many ways that people are mothers or parents. And so like to be included in something like that would feel extra meaningful to me just because that's acknowledging the type of mother I am, which is a bereaved mother.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so we looked at this from the perspective of kind of what are the triggers that are leading people either positive or negative to their sense of identity, looking at collective representations, which are kind of the norms of society, and even things like the 12-week stigma that's associated with, well, don't tell anyone that you're pregnant for 12 weeks. Well, that is, again, trying to stigmatize grief and saying you're not allowed to talk about it. You should hide this. And getting into like this natural order society that we can talk about spouse loss, we can talk about parent loss, but we can't talk about child loss because that violates the natural order.
When I think about spouse loss and how marketers include spousal loss, I want, are there examples of companies doing this right for other types of loss? I think when it comes to losing a parent, like I definitely see that represented in the media, and I see that represented in companies and like they talk about it in insurance ads or whatever it is. So I think that there are examples of parent loss, and that just makes me wonder, like maybe that, like, oh, and you know what I've also seen? I've also seen like military loss. Like it's almost like there's mothers who've maybe lost their child in the military. It's like we're comfortable around certain types of loss, but we're not comfortable around like baby and child loss. It's
exactly. Yeah, and what we are getting at, because we're writing up the paper now, we've got our theoretical model and all this kind of stuff. But one thing that we've realized is that baby loss and any other kind of loss you want to put into it, and I would put suicide in that same category, is it's stigmatized loss, and marketers are contributing to the stigma of that. Whereas as you talk about parent loss, military loss, things like that are non-stigmatized because we talk about them and they're open in the public, and marketers are helping with that in the ways that they're presenting it in the media. Part of feeling a sense of a new normalcy or positive outcomes is the ability to talk to other people and feel that you're not isolated and not alone. And if it's something we're not allowed to talk about, you may not know that your neighbor suffered a loss or someone in your community suffered a loss that could walk along with you in it. You're not supposed to talk about it, so you have to keep it to yourself, and you're not getting those emotions out in the way that's healthy.
Yeah.
So I know you spoke a lot about Facebook ads. Can we talk about ads? Because I think that the problem, one of the things that we live in now is that they're able to target so carefully each household and what each person, each household is so interested in. So if you're looking at baby things because you have an alive baby, it's like, what can we do as parents of babies who died how can we communicate them to stop? Like, what are they looking into options to communicate that. It feels like it's one way. It's like they're forcing all of this information on us, these ads on us. And there's really not a good way to say, I don't want that ad. That ad is really painful for me. You know, it's like a one-way channel.
That is what I want my research to do. Right now, I don't feel like there's an effective way to do that. But I feel like, so part of the community that I'm involved in, part of the academic community, I should say, is the marketing and public policy community. And at conferences in this area, public policymakers get together with academics, get together with practitioners, and we have conversations about research and where this is going to go. And so I think some of this really has to engage kind of a multidisciplinary group where the bereaved are having their voices shared with the policymakers, with the companies, because right now there isn't an effective way. And that's what I found so much in the research is people are like, you know, this is sensitive content, or this doesn't pertain, or I've seen this too much. Like those are your options for responding to content, but yet it keeps coming.
Yes. Why is that? Why is that? I said I don't want to see it.
I still, to this day, still get nursing bra ads. And I'm like, I have not breastfed a baby in over a year. Can we stop with this? Like, to this day, I'm like, enough.
I want to say something interesting on that. So I interviewed people at all different stages of loss, including one lady who had lost her twins back in the 1980s. And she said one of the triggers for her that she never expected was going through menopause and all the menopause ads. And so it's like advertisements about bras or different things for you to adjust to that period. But that is a mark of you can no longer have children. And that triggered her to think back to when she lost her children, because that was another point. You can't have children. So this doesn't just stop at the point that you're getting nursing bras at your age. This can be re-triggered at other experiences later in life when that point at which you can have kids stops.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Another thing that came out of the research a lot was this feeling of a loss of control. And so because there was nothing that they could do to save their baby's life. And so they really seek to have a sense of control to reestablish something after the loss. And one way that marketers could enable that is to give the bereaved mother the opportunity to control what kind of messaging they're getting and saying, no, I don't want to receive this, or I do want to receive this. But if you think back to 10, 15, 20 years ago, when we didn't have as much social media or ability for the consumer to interact as much, that's a much slower process because mailings get put in this like several week out process already. And so you may sit there and be 6 weeks out before you can actually stop the mailings from coming in.
If you can stop them at all.
It's interesting, you know, the Similac coupons are especially painful.
Can I just pause for a second? So people who, if you are listening and you have not lost a child, this is something that happens to every single bereaved parent I've spoken to has had this same issue. Because when you enter the medical system as someone who's going to be giving birth and then, you know, gives birth in some way, you get on the formula lists. I don't know how they get your freaking name, but they get your name.
Probably you also make a registry. And so when you make the registry, you get all these coupons when you get a registry.
You're just getting like endless, your baby dies, and then you're getting coupons for formula. You're getting coupons for diapers. You're sometimes, we got mailed like a random diaper little gift thing, like a size 3 diaper at some point in March after our son had died 2 months before. Like there's no way for you to be like, excuse me, like, I don't want these. And like, honestly, I think most new parents, even with their living children, are like, please stop with the mailings. Like, we get it, you know?
But it's not just the mail. It's also on the computer. It's like on your phone.
Oh my gosh.
Because when your baby is alive, you are searching for like, let's say 3 to 6 month clothes, or you know, you're buying you're searching on Amazon, a swing. I remember I was looking for Aiden for a jumper thingy that you like attach to the door and they jump. And I'm everywhere. They constantly jumpers. And it was horrific. And I had my aunt, and my aunt came for the funeral, and I told her, I was like, I need you to search for things that are not baby related so the computer stops telling me. And the poor lady tried for like 5 hours. She was searching like plants and furniture and jewelry, like, and they still came. It was like, I don't know. She wasn't doing a deep enough dive because they were like preferring the baby stuff over the jewelry.
I think one thing that a lot of consumers don't realize is when we talk about this term of search engine optimization, it's kind of like SEO. It's this term you've heard of, maybe you don't fully understand it, but it's the whole idea that companies can buy keywords and so their search results appear higher and they can optimize their website so that they appear in the searches and hopefully you're getting relevant results. Well, in the process of purchasing keywords or doing this, you can also indicate negative keywords, which basically means if a person types in that keyword, then the result will not pop up. And so my question with some of these companies is, are they actually doing that? So if they're buying words like baby, mother, diapers, like any of these words, are they buying loss, SIDS, death, and putting those into the negative keywords so that their results are not popping up? And that may be a potential solution if they're not, to trying to decrease this reach that's completely ineffective because you don't want it. It's a waste of money for them.
That's right. It is. And I will say, like, there are specific companies that I know I've been so targeted by since my son died that I have a very negative impression of them, even though it has nothing to do with them. Like, they obviously don't know. But I don't want to see Kindred Bravely, the nursing bra company, like 1,000 times. Like, I'm never going to buy a Kindred Bravely nursing bra because I just have such a negative association with them because they were targeted to me so heavily during a period of intense grief. So it would be in their best interest to not be targeting me because I will hopefully have more children and I'm never going to buy a nursing bra from them. Let's be honest.
I was going to ask that, like, you see people who do have more children, do you find that they're making decisions based on some of these negative experiences? Either avoid or support?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't have specific examples of companies. The company names didn't come up as much as it was just general examples of saying, this is what happened after my prior loss. And it absolutely changed the way that they proceeded with the next pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. So I must have done this, probably interviewed maybe sometime in June or July. And I remember you reached out to me to ask for a pseudonym for me and for Quinn for your research paper. And it happened to be that you emailed me on his birthday. And it was so fun. I can't even tell you, to come up with a fun little pseudonym for him, on his birthday. It felt like such a nice little fun thing to think about on his birthday, which was otherwise, kind of a sad day, obviously.
That's so special. Because you emailed me back and you're like, oh, this is so special. And I thank you. So I may actually use that quote from your email in my research when talking about the benefits of the research to the participants as well, not just as a whole.
Oh my God, please do. I really loved doing that. I wound up choosing the name that we almost named Quinn. And then for my pseudonym, I chose the name that I was almost named. So I thought that was a fun little thing. Judith, did you have fun picking out a pseudonym for Aiden, or were you stressed about it?
It was such a blur. I don't remember anything. I think I chose his middle name, but then you couldn't because someone else had taken Noah, I think, and I had to take something else. But I remember interviewing with you, but I can remember a few things that you asked and that I said. I remember I said it felt like when I got pregnant that all these companies wanted to be my friend, and we started a friendship. And then when my son died, it was they disappeared. Huggies and I had become friends, and Pampers and I had this relationship. Even now, it makes me sad to think about. There were certain things in my house that when Aiden was alive, they were just such staples, And then one day, it's there's no more. The conversation just stops mid-sentence. That's how I remember saying that. The conversation just stops mid-sentence. But other than that, it was such a blur. I can tell you where I sat when I did the interview, but everything this year, I can't remember anything. I can't remember anything from this year. It was early. It was early on in our loss. But it was also early on in your loss. I don't know how you did this.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, you said you kind of started the study because you were going back to work and you were having a hard time figuring out how the heck to do that, right? Mm-hmm. But have you found any healing in doing the study? Have you found that it's been okay going back to work and doing such a study that's so close to home? Like, I don't think I could do it, but I'm curious if it's been better for you or harder or easier.
It's definitely been helpful. And I think just people's responses when they find out that this is the research that I'm doing has been really valuable, as people are like, I'm so amazed by you and amazed by you actually being able to do something with the trauma and not just burying it. And I even had one person, so I applied for a sabbatical for next year, and got approved for it for one semester.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, and a sabbatical in academia, basically you've worked at an institution for a while and they give you a semester off full pay to be able to work on a research project. And so I'm going to work on this research and getting it out. But there is one person that responded to me and they said, we are so amazed by what you've done, because they had gone through something similar, but they felt like they could not ever broach it or deal with it in the academic realm. And so comments like that, of just knowing that I'm helping these voices to be heard, is so powerful. Yeah, I feel like I have to be hesitant how I say this, just because it is like with Institutional Research Board, this is all anonymous. Technically, you all are anonymous, but you volunteered your participation. Yeah, that was not me bringing it up. But I do have to be vague in what I refer to, because this is something very private of people's information.
I was going to ask, like, what do you see from your academic friends who haven't been touched by loss? Like, do people get awkward around it? Do people get uncomfortable? Or do they want to talk about it?
It depends. It's so varied. I think a lot of people is similar to real life, that it is kind of awkward. So I went to this conference last week, the Marketing Theory and Practice Conference, which is why I said, let's wait to do this interview until after I go back, because I may have some feedback or thoughts on it. And interestingly, I thought I was going to go in there and they were going to like critique my theoretical model or offer thoughts on like, have you considered this perspective or that perspective? And no, like someone in the room starts crying and someone else is just gasps. And then the whole time they're like, I'm so sorry. I can't believe this happened. I'm like, okay, this was totally not the reaction that I expected. But for us, it's like, oh, my child died. Next slide. And then, they're like, whoa, we're learning about like packaging and advertising, and all of a sudden here's someone talking that their child died. Like, we need to stop on this slide and take a while to process that. And I guess you just get so numb to telling your story that you kind of forget about other people's responses.
Can I ask do you disclose that you, like in the actual paper, I don't know if you've started writing the actual paper yet, but do you have to disclose in the paper that you are a bereaved parent yourself?
No, not at all. I will totally do it though. I will do it in the acknowledgement section, because going back again, this is part of my identity. Like Solomon is my life.
That's right.
And so I'm totally going to mention him in there. I don't care what people have to say, or if they reject my paper because they're like, oh, it's too personal. I don't care. As long as he's in there, that's what matters to me.
Do you worry you won't get like the same kind of unbiased feedback because people will be so heartbroken? Like I always feel like people like treat me differently. They treat me with like kid gloves,
I could see, I don't know. Some of our journals are pretty harsh, but maybe, I don't know, I'll take it.
Alina and I always talk about how we get like these, like there are some perks and they're like the worst perks, but like we'll take them, like I'm trying, like, there have been times where like I got out a parking ticket or something because I'm like, my baby died, it's like, it's like a horrible thing. I obviously rather have my baby, but I could, if I get $40 because someone feels bad for me.
Right.
It's like the worst consolation prize in the world, but I guess I'll do it. Well, I was going to ask about, back to your colleagues' reactions and like being in such a professional space. What about talking about it with your students? Is this something that you will?
I think my students they just don't understand it all. Because on the first day of class, I feel like I just have to announce this because it is part of me. And most professors, when they start class, they talk a little bit about like, this is my spouse, or I have 2 kids, or I have a cat, and this is what I like to do, to try to develop some kind of connection with the students, rather than just coming in and saying, here's the content I'm going to deliver to you. So I put a picture of Solomon up on the screen. I'm like, this is my son. And he's what I live for. He's my motivation in life. He's why I care about mentorship and I care about you all as students. And you can tell most of them are like, and then I tell them obviously that my son died. And a lot of them are like, I don't know, they just have never experienced loss and they don't understand at all. And then, you have the student that's like, oh, I understand my dog died. And I'm like, okay, I know it's about as good as you can get, but it is not the same as having a dog die.
Confused about how to respond there.
Yeah, and I don't want to place that on everyone. I remember one student specifically that came up to me after class and they said that their mom had lost a child. I can't remember if it was before or after them. And they were really heartbroken about my story because they were thinking about their sibling that they never had. And then I had one other student come up and talk about how their parent had lost a child, like due to SIDS basically, and that was their first child. And so that would have been their oldest sibling. And so I think the students who are in families that have normalized this, that have had those experiences, like you could just see their heart melt and be like, I understand, like that could have been my sibling. But the students that have never experienced loss, have never even lost a grandparent, I just think they don't understand. And I think I wouldn't have understood until I became a parent, at least, to the magnitude of which your child becomes a part of you and you're willing to give anything and everything for that child.
Yeah. Just last week with Dr. Goldstein, we were talking about how the relationship between a parent, mother, and a child must go on even after the child's death. And it feels like this is the way that you develop that relationship with Solomon, and this is the way that you continue it, and you guys continue to be in conversation through this work. And I think that's really, it's special that you're able to do that. In my work, Alina, in your work, it definitely would not be possible.
Definitely not. I sell shoes.
She helps with something with the shoes, something selling.
I'm the technical project manager for the software team that does the websites for shoes. I work with a lot of marketers. So
Alina, do you think that they're trying to be better at something like this? Do you think they care?
I will say, so speaking from my experience working with marketers, I have, just on a personal level, we're entering Mother's Day season. It's a nightmare for me personally. Mm-hmm. I remember my first week back from work last year, right after Quinn died. I took 9 weeks off. And then my first week back was like the week that all the marketers were putting in all of their Mother's Day, campaign requests and everything. And I was like, oh my God, just bombarded with it. And, Mother's Day, I think is a time that people frequently are like I know I'm already kind of like, oh, my shoulders are up a little bit because it's like, it's just everywhere. But yeah, it is not remotely a conversation among the marketers at my company. And even with me in the room, a bereaved mother, that it's just not a conversation at all. That's just not on their minds. So
what does this look like from the marketer's perspective, Elizabeth? How would they look at this issue?
It's just amazing to me. So another thing that really came out, and this gets at your question, one thing that really came out of the interviews is the constant comment of saying, okay, marketers are being so inclusive today. If we talk about gay pride and LGBTQ awareness and racial awareness, and kudos to the marketers for bringing awareness to this, but a lot of these groups are a very small subsegment of the population. And if you think about bereaved mothers, if more than 1 in 4, almost 1 in 3 mothers will lose a child between the point of the beginning of gestation and 1 year after birth, then why are we not including these people? And so it's like we're being inclusive to all these areas, but we're not being inclusive to this segment that's actually a very large chunk of the population.
And then also, if you add in the infertility community as well, which is 1 in 8 or 1 in 7, it's pretty high. It's a huge group of people. Huge.
Absolutely. That's a big sales point. They're making money off of inclusivity because people feel accepted and other people want to see that everyone's being included. It's a big trend right now. And so I would argue to a marketer that might say, well, I'm hesitant that's a stigmatized area. Well, anything that we're talking about with inclusivity is stigmatized. I don't care what the topic is. It's all the reason that it needs to be promoted is because it has been stigmatized. So why not bring it out into the public when this is something that so many people experience? And even just as simple as a message on Mother's Day saying, Happy Mother's Day to the moms who have the child in their arms, the moms who have lost a child and they aren't in the physical home, but they're in your hearts, and to everyone that desires to be a mother but is unable to. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how is that a negative thing? Like, someone's not going to be turned off by that. They're going to be like, oh, I appreciate this company that's being inclusive of all these different types of mothers.
Yeah. I sometimes, like, I've seen in various forums, or not like online forums, just in various interactions in my life since my son has died, that there's this kind of hesitancy to bring up infant loss because there's a worry about triggering the average mom, like ones who have not lost a child. And I wonder if that's some of the hesitancy as well, because it is so terrifying, the idea to losing a child. I wonder if that's why Pampers or, Huggies or Similac doesn't want to acknowledge it, because the average mom might turn away from a commercial if it mentions infant loss, because it is too terrifying to even think about.
That is an interesting point. The one thing that comes to mind is several of the interviews that talked about that bereaved mothers feel like they have baby dying disease, and basically that these other people are like, oh no, you cause babies to die. I don't want to be around you. I don't want to touch you. And it stems from the marketing literature on contagion, which basically means that if you're close to something, you can have those product attributes. You don't want to put feminine hygiene products next to food on the grocery store because people aren't going to buy the food. So if you put like a baby dying mother next to somebody else, then it's like, oh no, well, I have contagion of this mother and catch that disease.
Huh. Interesting.
But many mothers are both mothers to living children and non-living.
Yeah.
And so, I guess, how do people reconcile that?
That's a good question.
That's the question, right?
Well, because I definitely see people uncomfortable with my loss and uncomfortable with how comfortable I am with my loss.
Yeah.
Both. It's like a catch-22. It's like, if I like seem weird about it, well, they're really weird about it, and then it's just weird. If I seem comfortable with it, which I totally am, then they're like, she's too comfortable with it. Like you said, like, we just talk about it so casually, and so I feel like maybe part of it is that people don't know what to do. They just feel uncomfortable. They don't know how to respond. So it's like, not that they're being triggered necessarily, but it's just that they don't know where to place this information in their head.
Right.
They don't know at all. They don't know how to reconcile it. They don't know how to respond. It makes them uncomfortable because they don't know how to respond.
Right. And that's something big, that one of the implications we're taking out of the research is the need to educate consumers. And part of the way to do that is to bring it and normalize it and stop stigmatizing it, because we aren't going to know how to respond if we can't talk about it in the first place.
That's totally right. That's totally right. And, I can remember the first commercials that I did see with, gay dads in it. I remember the first time I saw it. I remember the second time I saw it. And then after a while, it just became so normal because I saw it all the time, And I think that that's such a good point. Like, if you see repeated messaging that this is a mother too, in all the commercials and all of, Mother's Day paraphernalia, I think that would make so many more people more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
It would just be part of life.
Yeah, I just have to share this story. So when I was flying back from the conference, you know how you sit on the airplane, you always get those awkward questions. Mm-hmm. So this guy is sitting next to me and he's like, oh, what do you do? And then his next question is, do you have kids? And I said, well, sort of. And he was like, I was like, do you really want to open this can of worms? And he was like, what do you mean by sort of? And I was like, oh, my child died last year. And then he gets this shocked look on his face and he's just like, oh, I'm sorry. And then he tries to look away and it's like, we're sitting next to each other for 3 hours, buddy. You started this. So So I think he's probably going to go home and be like, I will never ask another person if they have kids on the airplane again.
He probably feels like he put his foot in his mouth. Meanwhile, you're just like, yeah, I have a son. You know,
Yeah.
Like, for us, it's just, yeah, that's our son. Like that's what's up with us. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I feel like poor guy. Someone should just tell him like to say like, oh, what was his name? Or, I'm sorry for your loss. They just don't even know what to say. Like if they just had one sentence, the poor guy. I feel horrible. I've done that too. Like where I feel so bad. I'm like, oh man, you're stepping into something you do not want to step into.
Exactly. There's always that moment after they ask the question, and I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm like,
I like watch a train crash so slowly. I'm like, caution, do not go there for your sake. I mean, I'm not going to talk about it.
I'm like, I've got 3 hours and I'm just sitting here. So sometimes I would be like, yeah, I have a son. And it would just move on because I need to go about my life. I'm like, I'm just sitting on the airplane. So let's see where this goes.
It went nowhere. That's where it went. Poor guy. Like, oh, man. And then I think to myself, no, Judith, poor you. Like, no, poor
That's
guy.
right.
The guy has all his live children.
that is right.
That's right. And I helped educate him. That's what I have to tell myself, even though it was a very uncomfortable way of educating him. And hopefully it will get better.
Yeah.
You're normalizing it.
Yes.
So did he say anything else to you the entire ride home?
Yeah. So then he started talking about his work. Like it transitioned back to work. I could tell it was kind of uncomfortable for him.
He was like, oh, what are you researching? And you're like, you don't want to go there either. Abort mission. Okay, those were I'm really glad that we had this time to talk. Those were the questions that I had been thinking about, ruminating on since we first spoke. And I never knew what happened to our research, but now I know. Elizabeth, do you have any other questions?
No, I want to know when the paper comes out because I like to read research papers. I'm weird.
Yeah, and actually, so I was just chatting at a meeting with my colleagues yesterday, and one of the things that we do sometimes in academic research is what we call member checks. And basically, it's like you write up this and then you send it back to some of your interview participants for them to go through and say, does this seem to reflect reality? Mm-hmm. So if you all are interested, I'll share the paper before we actually send it out as kind of a member check, and you can offer feedback, and then we'll work on revising it before it goes out.
I would love to do that.
Was there anything that really surprised you in your research that like totally caught you off guard?
Yeah, a lot. I think the one thing that, again, just stuck out to me, and I've already talked about this, but is the whole idea of positive and negative triggers, because I just never thought of it that way before, that it's not just all these negative things that need to stop happening, but there are so many ways to positively trigger a bereaved mother by acknowledging her child, by acknowledging that she's a mother, by keeping that identity present. So I'd say that's one thing that has just kind of stuck with me, and I've passed that along to every other bereaved mother I run into, and anyone that's like, how do I support this person? I'm like, think about positive triggers. Like if you make them cry, it's okay. Like that's good because they are remembering that that's their child and they are still a mother.
That's right. Yeah.
And kudos to you all as we talk about like making meaning and purpose after loss. Like kudos to you all for doing this.
Yeah.
And being
the
legacy for your children. You definitely are.
Thank you so much. We've really been enjoying it. This is an idea. We started this podcast. We had the idea, and then the next day we recorded, and then the next day we released it, and that was it. And then we were just doing it.
Wow.
Right.
Well, one of the things that's been so meaningful is when people say that they like feel alone. They don't know other people that have experienced loss, but they feel like through the podcast they like feel a little less alone, a little more supported. They have a place to talk, like just to think about their child and laugh about their child, and like we become kind of like a friend to them through the podcast, and that feels really good.
That's beautiful.
To all of our wonderful new friends, we want to hear from you. Email us at aslongasimlivingpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at aslongasimlivingpodcast. We'll get back to you as soon as our grieving brains allow.
Yay!